The air in the terminal was thick with the scent of stale coffee and anxiety. On Zenith Airlines Flight 715, boarding had just begun. In seat 12, a 16-year-old Elijah Vance, a kid on the cusp of his future, was triple-checking his boarding pass. In the aisle, Emily Miller, a woman clinging to her status, saw him as just one more obstacle. She didn't see the prodigy. She saw a problem in a seat she felt she deserved, but she had no idea who was in the cockpit. In 3 minutes, her demand for respect would collide with the one man on the plane. She couldn't bully the captain. The pulse of John F. Kennedy International Airport was a low, frantic thrum. It was the sound of 1,000,000 last-minute decisions of reunions and bitter goodbyes, all compressed into the cathedral-sized terminals. For 16-year-old Elijah Vance, it was just background noise. He stood near the gate for Zenith 715 to Los Angeles, a tall, lanky teenager who seemed to be trying to fold himself into invisibility. He wore simple black sneakers, neat jeans, and a nondescript grey hoodie. The only thing that marked him was the intense focus in his dark eyes, which were scanning a document on his phone that looked less like social media and more like a pre-flight checklist. He was in seat 12A Premium Economy. He'd checked the seat map a dozen times. Window just behind the wing, perfect view of the flap, and aileron assembly. Elijah was, to put it mildly, an aviation fanatic. It wasn't just a hobby, it was his language. He'd built his first working radio-controlled glider at 10. By 13, he was spending hours in a flight simulator his dad had helped him build from salvaged parts. Now, at 16, he was the youngest ever winner of the Zenith Aviation Future Leaders Scholarship, a prestigious and punishingly competitive program. This flight wasn't just a trip. It was the first day of the rest of his life. He was flying to LAX to shadow the operations crew, and if he was lucky, meet his mentor. He'd earned this. He'd earned this seat. He clutched the strap of his worn backpack, which contained not clothes but his laptop, 2 textbooks on aerodynamics, and his logbook. The boarding call for Premium Economy finally came. Elijah, ever methodical, waited for his zone, shuffled forward, and gave a shy, polite nod to the flight attendant at the door. He found 12A and slipped into it, the world outside the small, triple-paned window, instantly becoming his entire focus. He was home. 10 minutes later, the main cabin boarding was in full swing, and the atmosphere in the premium section began to curdle. Emily Miller arrived at row 12 in a cloud of expensive perfume and palpable irritation. She was a woman in her late 40s, dressed in a sharp, cream-colored pantsuit that looked increasingly out of place as she wrestled her heavy roller bag. Emily was a senior partner at a cutthroat marketing firm, and she lived her life by a simple, brutal code: you either had status or you were dirt. Her day had been a disaster. A 6 a.m. meeting had gone sideways. Her driver had been late. And now, the gold status line she prided herself on had been just as long as the regular one. She had an 8-figure pitch meeting in Los Angeles tomorrow morning, a make-or-break deal with Zenith Airlines itself, and her entire career was riding on it. She was not in the mood for this. This, in her mind, was the lanky black kid in the window seat. She stopped blocking the aisle. "Excuse me," she snapped, not at anyone in particular, but at the universe. The passenger in 12B, a nervous-looking man named Mark Chen, quickly moved his feet. Emily huffed and began with great theatrical effort to lift her bag into the overhead bin. It was heavy, and she was clearly struggling. Elijah, noticing her struggle, pulled off his headphones. "Ma'am, would you like some help with that?" Emily glanced at him, her eyes flicking over his hoodie with disdain. "I can manage my own bag, thank you." She gave it a final violent shove, and it slotted into place. She then turned her attention to her seat, 12C the aisle. She looked at Elijah in 12A. She looked at Mark Chen, the mild-mannered man in 12B. And she looked at the window. Emily hated the aisle. She felt trapped by the beverage cart, vulnerable to every passing passenger. She needed the window. It was a power position, a place to disconnect and work. She'd specifically requested it. The system must have glitched. And now this kid was in her spot. He was probably on a family ticket, some welfare-funded vacation. Her mind, wired for combat, had already written the entire story. "You're in the wrong seat," she said. It wasn't a question. Elijah blinked, pulling his headphones down around his neck. "I'm sorry. The window seat," she said, pointing as if to a dog. "That's my seat. You need to move." Elijah, a stickler for rules, felt a small, cold knot of anxiety. He pulled out his phone, his boarding pass displayed on the screen. No, ma'am. It says 12A. See?" He politely angled the screen. Emily didn't even look at it. "The system is wrong. I am a gold status member, and I am always assigned a window seat. There's been a mistake and you're in it. Now move." Mark Chen, in the middle seat, 12B, began to look extremely uncomfortable. He was an accountant. He did not like conflict. He just wanted to read his Tom Clancy novel. "Ma'am?" Elijah said, his voice quiet but firm. "My pass says 12A. Your pass must be for 12C. That's the aisle seat." Emily's face, which had been merely annoyed, began to tighten. The mask was slipping. "Listen to me," she said, her voice dropping to a low, condescending hiss. "I have a multi-million-dollar presentation to prepare. I don't have time to argue with a child. You can either move to an empty middle seat in the back, or I will make you move. Do you understand me?" The threat hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Elijah's hands, which had been resting on his textbook, balled into fists. He knew this. This was the moment where he was expected to become small, to apologize for existing, to give in to the sheer crushing weight of an adult's baseless anger. "Ma'am," he said, and he hated the slight tremor in his voice. "I'm not moving. This is my assigned seat. I paid for this ticket." "Paid for it." Emily let out a short, sharp laugh that was more like a bark. "Oh, I doubt that. Now get up. I'm not going to ask you again." She wasn't asking. She was demanding, and the entire section of the plane was beginning to notice. The boarding process was like a river, and Emily Miller was a rock diverting the flow of passengers who now had to squeeze past her muttering apologies and casting annoyed glances. She was oblivious to them, her entire focus, all the day's pent-up frustration and entitlement, now laser-focused on the teenager in seat 12A. "I said get up," Emily repeated, her voice louder now. Elijah shook his head, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I'm not moving. Please, ma'am, you're holding up the line." "You don't get to tell me what I'm doing," she hissed. She turned to the man in 12B. Mark Chen on his boarding pass. "Are you going to let him speak to me like that?" She jabbed a finger at Mark. "Switch seats with him. You take the one in the back. I'll take the window. He can have the middle." Mark Chen looked up, his eyes wide behind his glasses. I'm sorry, I'm 12B. This is my seat. I just want to—" "Useless," Emily muttered. She turned her full attention back to Elijah. This is what's wrong with your generation. No respect, no decency. You just take. This seat, this premium section, it's for working people. People who've earned it. Not for kids on a handout. The words "people like you" were unsaid, but they hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Elijah's face, which had been pale with anxiety, flushed with a hot, slow-burning anger. "I did earn it," he said, his voice just above a whisper. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," Emily scoffed. "I know you're in my spot, and I know you're going to move." It was at this point that Maria Rodriguez, the flight attendant who had greeted Elijah so warmly, noticed the bottleneck. Maria was a 20-year veteran of the skies. She had seen everything. She had de-escalated brawls, comforted grieving widows, and even helped deliver a premature baby over the Atlantic. She had a PhD in human drama, and she could spot a level 4 disruptor from 100 paces. She walked toward the commotion, her customer service smile firmly in place, but her eyes were sharp. "Is there a problem here, ma'am?" she asked, her voice a calm, smooth island in the sea of Emily's agitation. Emily spun on her, energized by a new target. "Yes, there is. This boy," she spat the word, "is in my seat. He's refusing to move, and he's being incredibly rude." Maria didn't look at Elijah. Her focus was entirely on Emily. "I understand you're frustrated, ma'am. May I see your boarding pass, please?" Emily, with a triumphant smirk at Elijah, fumbled for her phone. "Here. See Emily Miller. Gold status." Maria looked at the pass. "Thank you, Miss Miller. This shows your seat as 12C. The aisle seat." "No!" Emily's voice was rising to a near shriek. "That's a mistake. I always have a window. The system always gives me a window. He must have switched it. He probably sweet-talked the gate agent." Maria's smile didn't waver, but her eyes went cold. "Ma'am, the gate agents cannot change a seat assignment without the passenger's permission, and our system shows this gentleman," she nodded politely to Elijah, "has been assigned 12A for over a month. He is in the correct seat." "I don't care." Emily was losing it. The carefully constructed facade of the business executive was cracking, revealing the raw, unadulterated entitlement beneath. "He's just a kid. He's in a hoodie. He doesn't belong in premium economy. Make him move." The dog whistle had become a bullhorn. The word "belong" echoed in the small cabin. Elijah, who had been trying to remain small, finally sat up. He looked past Emily, his eyes finding Maria's. "I'm Elijah Vance," he said, his voice clear, though he was visibly trembling. "I'm on the Zenith Future Leaders Scholarship. I'm flying to LAX for the mentorship program. This is my seat." Maria's expression softened instantly. "Mr. Vance? Of course. We're so excited to have you. Congratulations on the scholarship." This public validation, this simple act of acknowledgement, sent Emily Miller over the edge. "Scholarship!" she shrieked. "Oh, I see, a diversity program, a token. So you're taking my seat on a handout. This is discrimination. I am a paying customer. I pay his salary." She pointed at Maria. "I pay for this whole plane. I demand to speak to your supervisor. I demand you get the captain down here. Now I want this charity case removed from the flight." The scene had reached a point of no return. Passengers were filming. Mark Chen was actively trying to merge with the seat cushion. Maria Rodriguez's customer service smile finally vanished. She stood up to her full height. "Ma'am, you are now causing a major disturbance. You have used threatening language, and you are harassing another passenger who is a minor. I need you to take your assigned seat, 12C, or I will have to call the captain." "Good," Emily screamed, her face mottled with rage. "Do it, I want him. He'll sort this out. He'll understand what a real priority passenger looks like." Maria held her gaze for one long, cold second. Then she turned, unhooked the intercom from her belt, and pressed the button. "Purser to flight deck," she said, her voice betraying no emotion. "We have a passenger disturbance at 12C refusing to comply, requesting captain's presence at the gate." Emily crossed her arms, a look of vindicated fury on her face. "Good. Let's see how fast you're fired." Elijah just closed his eyes, his dream trip turning into his worst nightmare. 3 minutes. That was the time from Emily's final shriek to the sound of the reinforced cockpit door clicking open. The cabin, which had been a hive of whispers and sideways glances, went utterly silent. Even the people shuffling down the aisle froze. A pilot leaving the cockpit during boarding is a rare and serious event. It's a sign that the carefully managed script of air travel has been set on fire. The man who emerged was not just any pilot. He was tall, with a commanding presence that seemed to suck all the recycled air out of the cabin. His silver-flecked dark hair was cut in a neat military style, and his uniform was immaculate. On his shoulder, 4 gold stripes gleamed under the cabin lights. This was Captain David Harrison. He didn't look angry. He looked precise. His eyes, a sharp, intelligent blue, swept the cabin, instantly assessing the bottleneck at row 12. He saw Maria, her face a mask of professionalism. He saw Emily Miller, puffed up with self-righteous indignation, her arms crossed, tapping her foot. And he saw a terrified kid in a hoodie crammed against the window. Emily, seeing the captain, actually smiled. This was the authority she understood. This was the man who would validate her. "Captain," she said, her voice dripping with a newly found sycophantic politeness. "Thank goodness. I am so glad you're here. This woman," she gestured to Maria, "has been completely useless, and this person," she pointed at Elijah, "is in my seat and has been incredibly disrespectful." Captain Harrison's gaze rested on Emily for a single unblinking second. He didn't speak to her. He didn't acknowledge her complaint. He looked past her, his eyes locking on the window seat. His expression, which had been hard as stone, shifted. It wasn't a big change, just a fractional softening, a spark of recognition that completely bypassed the fuming woman in the aisle. "Elijah," the captain said. His voice was a deep baritone, and it cut through the silence. Elijah's head, which had been bowed, snapped up. His eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and confusion, met the captain's. "Captain Harrison," Elijah whispered, his voice cracking. I didn't know this was your flight." The smile on Emily Miller's face didn't just fade. It shattered. It was as if the floor had dropped out from under her. You know him," she stammered. Captain Harrison finally turned his full attention to Emily. The fractional warmth he'd shown Elijah was gone, replaced by an arctic chill. "Ma'am, I do," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "This boy is Elijah Vance. He is the national winner of the Zenith Aviation Future Leaders Scholarship. He is flying to Los Angeles to begin a mentorship program that I personally oversee." He took a step closer, forcing Emily to take an involuntary step back. "To be more precise, Ms. Miller, he is my personal guest on this aircraft, and he is my mentee." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the industrial-grade carpet. Mark Chen, in 12B, let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a full minute. Emily's brain was scrambling, trying to recalculate to find a new angle. But he didn't say anything, He shouldn't have to, ma'am, Captain Harrison said, his voice rising just enough to carry. He was in his assigned seat. He was bothering no one. You, on the other hand, have delayed the departure of this aircraft. You have harassed a member of my flight crew, and you have verbally assaulted a minor. He turned his gaze to Maria, who had remained silent and watchful. Ms. Rodriguez, give me the report. Maria stepped forward, her professionalism a shield. Captain, the passenger in 12C, Ms. Miller, refused to take her seat. She demanded passenger 12A, Mr. Vance, move. She accused him of being a charity case and a token. She said he didn't belong in this section. When I informed her Mr. Vance was in his correct seat, she demanded he be removed from the flight and called for you. Captain Harrison nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Emily's. Heard, Maria. Thank you. He looked back at Emily. Her face was a mask of pale, horrified disbelief. Ms. Miller, the captain said, your behavior is in direct violation of Section 91.11 of the Federal Aviation Regulations, which prohibits interference with a flight crew. Your language and targeted harassment of another passenger also violate Zenith's code of conduct. A code, he added, that you as a gold status member explicitly agreed to. I was just... Emily was completely deflated, the righteous fury replaced by a desperate, panicked backpedaling. It was a misunderstanding. I'm just stressed. I have a very important meeting in LA. Very important. Your meeting, Captain Harrison said, is not my concern. The safety and security of my flight is, and right now you are the primary threat to that. He held up a hand. You have exactly 2 choices, Miss Miller, and you will make one of them in the next 30 seconds. The entire cabin was now an audience. Phones were out, not just Mark Chen's, but a dozen others, all discreetly pointed toward the drama unfolding in row 12. Choice 1. Captain Harrison continued, his voice as steady as a gyro compass. You will take your assigned seat, 12C. You will put on your seatbelt. You will not speak to Mr. Vance. You will not speak to Mr. Chen. You will not speak to my flight crew unless it is a medical emergency. You will be for the next 5 hours and 30 minutes a model of perfect silent compliance. If you do this, I might be convinced to let this go with a formal written warning upon landing. That is option A. Emily Miller's eyes darted around. She saw the faces, the contempt, the pity, the sheer, unadulterated schadenfreude. To sit there for 5 hours in that aisle seat next to the very people she had just humiliated herself in front of, it was unthinkable. And option B, she whispered. Option B, the captain said, is that you will collect your ridiculous roller bag and you will deplane, right now. I will have you rebooked on the next available flight, which given the holiday weekend appears to be in 2 days. In a middle seat, in coach, your gold status will not help you. Emily's jaw dropped. You can't. My meeting, it's with your company. I'm pitching to Zenith Marketing tomorrow morning. This finally got a reaction from the captain. He raised an eyebrow, and a look of dawning, terrible realization passed over his face. He seemed to be connecting a very important, and for Emily, a very fatal dot. You're with Miller Chase. He said the name, tasting like ash in his mouth. Yes, Emily cried, sensing a lifeline. Yes, with Robert Chase. We have an 8 a.m. with Mr. Abernathy. You have to let me fly. Robert he'll be furious. Captain Harrison stared at her for a long, cold moment. The entire plane waited. He was, she assumed, weighing the political implications. He was, she assumed, realizing he'd overplayed his hand, that he'd messed with someone important. "Ms. Miller," he said, his voice flat. "Your assumption that your meeting with our marketing department gives you authority on my aircraft is perhaps the most deluded thing I've heard all day. Your business in LA is your own. My business is this plane." He tapped his watch. 30 seconds is up. What is your choice? The reality hit Emily like a physical blow. There was no negotiation. There was no appeal to a higher authority. In this metal tube at 30,000 feet, or in this case at the gate, the captain's word was law. He was the higher authority. To leave meant career suicide. The Zenith account was her entire year. To stay meant 5 hours of the most profound humiliation she had ever experienced. She looked at Elijah. He was watching her, his face no longer scared but sad. He just looked disappointed. That more than the captain's anger broke her. "Fine," she spat the word full of venom. She grabbed her purse, shoved it under the seat in front of 12C, and collapsed into the aisle seat. Her face a thundercloud of rage. She violently snapped the seatbelt and clicked it shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent cabin. Captain Harrison nodded, satisfied. A wise choice. He turned to the cabin at large. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. My crew will be coming by to complete their final checks. We should be underway shortly." He then looked down at Elijah, and the ice melted. "Elijah," he said, his voice full of warmth. "It's good to see you, son. I'm sorry about this." It's okay, Captain," Elijah stammered. "It's not, but we'll deal with it." He gave Elijah a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "I've got to fly this plane, but you come see me on the flight deck when we land, you hear me? I've got a surprise for you. We'll get you out of this seat before the rest of the cabin." "Yes, sir. Thank you, Captain." Captain Harrison gave a final steely glance at Emily Miller, who was staring fixedly at the seat back in front of her, her entire body rigid with fury. He nodded to Maria a silent, "Thank you," and walked back to the cockpit, the cabin parting for him once more. The cockpit door clicked shut. The engines began to spool, and the longest 5-hour flight of Emily Miller's life began. The flight from JFK to LAX is a grueling 5.5 hours on a good day. For the passengers of row 12, it was an eternity. The plane took off, and as it climbed through the low-hanging clouds over Queens, a thick, suffocating tension settled over the premium cabin. Emily Miller sat like a statue, her arms crossed, her jaw set. She had pulled out her laptop ostensibly to work on the multi-million-dollar presentation, but she was just staring at a blank PowerPoint slide. Her fingers were poised over the keyboard, but she wasn't typing. She was vibrating with a silent, impotent rage. Every small kindness from the flight crew was to her a tiny, calculated insult. When Maria Rodriguez came by with the beverage cart, she asked Elijah and Mark what they'd like. "Mr. Vance, can I get you anything?" "A Coke, some juice. It's all complimentary." "Just a water, please, Miss Rodriguez." "Thank you." "Mr. Chen." "Just a ginger ale, please." Then Maria turned to Emily. Her voice was flat professional and utterly devoid of warmth. "And for you, ma'am?" Emily just stared ahead. "Nothing." "Very well." Maria moved on. Emily felt the snub like a physical slap. The warmth she'd given that kid, and the ice she'd been given. She was the gold status member. She was the one paying for this. Meanwhile, Mark Chen, the accountant in 12B, was having his own internal crisis. He was a witness. He had seen the whole thing. He had filmed the first part of it before the captain arrived, his phone resting on his knee. He'd captured Emily's handout and token comments clearly. He'd stopped when the captain arrived, sensing the shift in authority. But he had the most damning evidence. He was a non-confrontational man. But this felt different. He looked at the kid Elijah, who had put his headphones back on and was now furiously scribbling notes in a textbook, trying to reclaim his focus. He looked at the woman, Emily, who was radiating pure poison. Mark made a decision. He quietly opened his email, attached the 45-second video file, and wrote a subject line, "Passenger harassment on Zenith 715. He found the general info at email for Zenith Airlines. It was a long shot, but he hit send. Then, just to be sure, he uploaded it to his own private cloud. He would decide what to do with it later. Elijah, for his part, was trying to disappear. He felt the heat of Emily's anger radiating from 2 feet away. He felt the pitying or curious glances from other passengers as they walked to the lavatory. He hated this. He hated being the center of a story. He was a numbers guy. He liked lift-to-drag ratios and fuel burn equations. He didn't like human drama. He tried to focus on his work. Captain Harrison. The Captain Harrison. David 0G Harrison, they called him. A legend. An ex-Air Force test pilot who had transitioned to commercial and now headed the entire mentorship program. Elijah had dreamed of meeting him, of shaking his hand. And their first meeting was this. Him being rescued like a damsel. He felt a wave of shame. He pushed it down. Harrison had called him son. He had stood up for him. That meant something. He just had to get through this flight. 2 hours in Emily's bladder, a traitor to her pride, demanded a visit to the lavatory. She unbuckled, stood up, and had to ask Mark and Elijah to move. "Excuse me," she said, the words clipped. Mark Chen scrambled to his feet. Elijah, unhooking his laptop, carefully stood in the aisle to let her pass. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Emily's were filled with pure, unadulterated hatred. Elijah's were just tired. She brushed past him, her shoulder deliberately bumping his. When she returned, she found Elijah and Mark already seated. She sat down, buckled up, and went back to staring at her blank laptop screen. The rest of the flight was a silent war of attrition. The sun tracked across the continent, the cabin darkened, and the tension in row 12 only got thicker. Emily Miller wasn't just losing a day. She was stewing in a broth of her own making, and the realization was dawning that the consequences of her 3-minute tirade were far from over. As the 737 began its long, graceful descent into the haze of Los Angeles, the fasten seatbelt sign chimed. Captain Harrison's voice came over the intercom, a smooth, professional balm. "Folks, this is the captain. We're on our final approach to LAX. We'll be on the ground in about 20 minutes. Weather in LA is a beautiful 75 degrees and clear. On behalf of your entire Zenith crew, I want to thank you for flying with us." He paused, then added one final non-standard note. "And as a personal request, we ask that you remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop at the gate. We have a special guest today who needs to deplane first. Thank you for your cooperation." Emily Miller's blood ran cold. A special guest. She knew. She knew. This was the final humiliation. The plane landed smoothly, a greaser, as pilots called it, a signature Harrison landing. It taxied to the gate, and the engine spooled down. The ding of the seatbelt sign not turning off was the first clue. Maria Rodriguez's voice came over the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, as the captain mentioned, we are letting a guest off first. Please remain in your seats." A moment later, Maria herself appeared at row 12. She smiled brightly at Elijah. "Mr. Vance, the captain is ready for you." Elijah gathered his backpack. He didn't look at Emily. He didn't look at Mark. He just slipped into the aisle. "Go on up to the flight deck," Maria said. "The door's unlocked." Elijah nodded, gave her a small, grateful smile, and walked the few steps to the front, disappearing into the cockpit. The entire plane watched him go. Emily's face was chalk white. This was it. The kid was getting a cockpit tour as a reward for her misunderstanding. The seatbelt sign finally turned off. The cabin erupted into the familiar chaos of deplaning, but Emily didn't move. She was in the aisle seat, but she let everyone in her row, everyone behind her, go. She was in no hurry. Her important meeting suddenly felt very, very far away. When she finally gathered her things and stepped into the jet bridge, she was expecting to just walk off, to go to the hotel, and try to salvage her career. She was not prepared for what was waiting at the end of the jet bridge. Standing there next to the gate agent were 2 LAX airport police officers and a stern-looking woman in a sharp Zenith Airlines business suit. The woman was holding a tablet. "Ms. Emily Miller?" the woman asked. Emily's stomach dropped. "Yes." "My name is Angela Jacobs," the woman said. "I'm the station manager for Zenith at LAX. Could you please step over here? We've received a report about an incident on your flight." The other passengers, the ones who had been in the premium cabin, were all slowing down, trying to watch. "A report?" Emily tried to bluster. "It was a misunderstanding. The captain, it was all sorted out." "On the contrary," Ms. Jacobs said, her voice like ice. "Captain Harrison filed his full report mid-flight, as did Miss Rodriguez, as did—" She glanced at her tablet, a Mr. Mark Chen in seat 12B, who was kind enough to include video. Emily's legs went weak. "Video. Ms. Miller," Ms. Jacobs said, "your behavior on today's flight was unacceptable. You verbally harassed a minor, you interfered with a flight crew, and you used racist and derogatory language." "I did not," Emily gasped. I'm not a racist. Your claim that Mr. Vance was a token and a charity case who didn't belong in his seat has been noted by 3 separate witnesses, including the flight crew. As a result, Zenith Airlines is revoking your gold status and all associated privileges effective immediately. "You can't do that," Emily shrieked, her voice echoing in the terminal. "We can and we have," Ms. Jacobs said calmly. "It's in the terms and conditions of the A Advantage program. Conduct unbecoming is a clear violation. You are also banned from all Zenith Airlines flights for a period of 1 year. A year. This was a nightmare. I have a meeting tomorrow with Mr. Abernathy." Ms. Jacobs actually winced. "Ah, yes, about that." The terminal was no longer just a backdrop. It was a theater, and Emily Miller was on stage involuntarily under the harshest of spotlights. Passengers from other gates were slowing down their curiosity, piqued by the official uniforms. The 2 LAX police officers stood impassively, hands on their belts, creating a silent, uncrossable perimeter. They weren't there to arrest her, Ms. Jacobs had said. They were there, she now realized, to contain her, like a hazardous spill. "About my meeting." Emily repeated the thread of panic in her voice, fraying into pure, raw terror. "Yes," Ms. Jacobs said. She held her tablet like a stone carving of a death warrant. The video Mr. Chen sent to our general customer service box. Well, that's usually a black hole. But his email sent mid-flight was passionate. He mentioned racist abuse and harassment of a minor. That got it flagged, and when the system cross-referenced your name, Emily Miller, with our high-priority passenger manifest for tomorrow's corporate meetings, it set off every alarm on the floor. What does that mean? Emily's mouth was dry. She could taste the stale, recycled air of the plane. It means Ms. Miller. Ms. Jacobs said, her voice dropping, that your make-or-break pitch with Mr. Abernathy was for the Zenith Future Leaders program. Emily's blood didn't just run cold, it turned to whoosh. The what? She stammered, though she knew what was coming. The Zenith Aviation Future Leaders Scholarship. Your firm was pitching the new national marketing campaign for it. The program Mr. Vance won. The program Mr. Abernathy founded and considers his personal legacy. The video of you calling his star recipient the poster child for his entire $20 million initiative a token and a charity case. Ms. Jacobs didn't need to finish. She tapped her tablet. Mr. Abernathy has already seen the 45-second clip. Twice. Emily Miller stopped breathing. The dots didn't just connect. They collided with the force of a head-on crash. The pitch, the scholarship, the kid, the captain, her meeting, her career. It was all one single interconnected web, and she had just set the entire thing on fire. Her mind flashed to the PowerPoint slides she'd been staring at for 5 hours. Slides full of smiling, diverse, young faces with taglines like, "Zenith lifting up the future." She was going to pitch that hours after being filmed, trying to tear down the very embodiment of it. "Oh no," she whispered, a sound of profound spiritual collapse. "Oh my God. No, no, no. Mr. Abernathy is protective as..." Jacob said, with the colossal understatement of a woman describing a grizzly bear as fuzzy. I can explain." Emily pleaded, her voice a reedy, desperate shriek. She looked at the police officers as if they could somehow save her. "It was the stress. I was having a terrible day. I didn't mean it. I'm not a racist. It was a mistake. Ms. Miller, your meeting was the mistake." Ms. Jacobs said, her voice now completely devoid of any human sympathy. "Your meeting for tomorrow morning is, needless to say, cancelled. Mr. Abernathy's exact words in his email to me 2 hours ago were, 'Anyone who treats a member of my team and Elijah Vance is a member of my team.' Like that will never set foot in a Zenith boardroom. Ever. Tell her Miller Chase is blacklisted. Permanently. And send my personal regards to Captain Harrison for his decisive action." Blacklisted. The word was a legal and financial death sentence. Her partner, Robert Chase. He wouldn't just be angry. He wouldn't just fire her. He would destroy her. This wasn't just a lost account. This was the end of the firm. She had just annihilated 2 decades of work. She was spiraling, falling into a black pit of her own making, and just when she thought she had finally hit the bottom, the ground opened up again. A door from the jet bridge clicked open. Out walked Captain David Harrison, his flight bag in one hand. He was laughing, a deep, easy sound that filled the tense silence. He was chatting warmly with the young man next to him. It was Elijah. But it wasn't the Elijah from seat 12A. The worn grey hoodie was gone. In its place, he wore a brand-new official Zenith Airlines flight jacket. It was a deep navy blue with epaulet holders on the shoulders and a crisp embroidered Zenith logo on the breast. Underneath it, on the left, was a second patch, a set of silver wings with a torch in the center, the official insignia of the future leaders, and stitched beneath it in gold thread, E. Vance. The surprise from the captain wasn't just a tour, it was an anointing. It was a uniform. Elijah looked transformed. He was standing taller, his shoulders back. The jacket, a perfect fit, gave him an air of profound, indisputable authority, of belonging. He wasn't a kid in a hoodie anymore. He was a member of the tribe, a future professional, a colleague. He was beaming, his earlier terror replaced by the pure, unadulterated joy of a kid who had just met his hero and been officially claimed by him. They both stopped when they saw the scene. The laughter died in Captain Harrison's throat. His eyes swept the tableau. Ms. Jacobs, the two police officers, and the utterly broken chalk-white woman in the cream pantsuit that now looked rumpled and pathetic. Elijah's smile faltered instantly. The joy drained from his face, replaced by that same profound sadness from the plane. He looked at Emily, and there was no triumph in his eyes, only a deep, painful pity. Captain Harrison's face, however, hardened into a mask of cold, righteous fury. He looked at Ms. Jacobs, who gave him a curt, professional nod, a silent, "It's done." He looked at Emily, who was now staring at him, her eyes wide with a desperate, silent, pleading horror. "Please," her expression begged, "help me. Say something. Fix this." Captain Harrison gave her nothing. No pity, no "I told you so." He just held her gaze for one long, devastating second, his contempt a palpable force. Then he deliberately turned his back on her. He put a firm, fatherly hand on Elijah Vance's shoulder on the new jacket. He steered him away from the wreckage toward the main terminal. As they walked past, brushing by the ruins of Emily Miller's life, Captain Harrison looked back at her one last time over his shoulder. "Ms. Jacobs," he said, his voice a commanding baritone that cut through the terminal buzz. "Thank you for handling this. I'll be filing the full FAA report from the hotel." "Miss Miller," he added, his voice dropping to an Arctic flatline, "I suggest you find another airline, permanently." He then turned his full, warm attention back to his young mentee, his voice loud enough for Emily and the surrounding passengers to hear clearly. "Come on, Elijah," he said, the warmth returning. "Don't let this ruin your night. Mr. Abernathy was so impressed with your composure, he's taking us both to dinner at Spargo. He wants to discuss fast-tracking your co-op program and getting you into a simulator by Christmas." They walked away. The seasoned veteran his duty done, and the young prodigy his future just beginning. Leaving Emily Miller alone to face the two police officers, her one-year ban, her blacklisted firm, and the immediate terrifying reality of her new life. The video Mark Chen had sent to a general customer service email was by sheer luck opened by a junior marketing associate. That associate, who had already seen the internal alert from Ms. Jacobs, knew exactly what he was looking at. He bypassed his immediate boss and sent it directly to Mr. Abernathy's team. But Mark Chen, feeling a surge of righteous indignation, hadn't stopped there. He'd also sent the 45-second clip to a major aviation news blogger he followed. The result was a digital explosion. Before Emily Miller's flight-delayed luggage had even hit the carousel, the video titled "Zenith Gold Status, Karen Attacks Teen Prodigy" was rocketing across the internet. By the time she was being led through the terminal by the LAX police, her face contorted in that mask of rage was already the lead story on Twitter's trending tab. The karma was not just hard, It was swift, total, and utterly devastating. Her phone, when she finally found a quiet corner in the baggage claim to turn it off airplane mode, didn't just vibrate, it screamed. It was a solid, unending buzz of notifications, a digital avalanche of hate. Hundreds of emails, texts, and social media tags. The clip was everywhere. CNN, Fox, MSNBC. They were all playing it on a loop with experts dissecting the moment. Her multi-million-dollar presentation was now a footnote to her new identity, plain Karen. She tried to call an Uber, but her corporate credit card was declined. Odd, she thought her mind still foggy with panic. She tried her personal card, also declined. She didn't know that her firm's CFO, upon seeing the video and Robert Chase's apoplectic email, had immediately frozen all her corporate accounts, and as a precautionary measure against legal fees, had a company lawyer put a temporary freeze on her personal assets tied to the partnership. She was alone, in LA, with no money and no way home. Then the one call she was dreading came through. Robert Chase, her partner. Emily. His voice was not human. It was a low, cold vibration of pure, unadulterated rage. Rob, please let me explain. It was the stress, the meeting. I wasn't thinking. You weren't thinking, he hissed. No, you're right. You were just being, weren't you? This is who you are, Emily. I've seen glimpses, but this is a masterpiece. Rob, I can fix this. I'll issue an apology. An apology. You think I'm sorry fixes this, Emily. I've spent the last hour on the phone with Zenith's general counsel. They're not just blacklisting our firm. They're exploring a breach of conduct lawsuit against us for harassment, claiming you were a representative of our brand. Our entire West Coast portfolio is under review. Our stock, if we were public, we'd be bankrupt. You've destroyed 20 years of work in 3 minutes. What do I do? She whispered, sinking onto a hard plastic bench, the smell of Cinnabon from the food court making her want to retch. Here's what you do, Emily. Nothing. You are to have no further contact with this firm. Our lawyers have already invoked the morality clause in our partnership agreement. You are, as of 5:01 p.m. Pacific Time, voted out. Your shares are forfeit to cover damages. Don't come back to the office. Don't call me again. You are a radioactive nothing. The line clicked dead. She was stranded. She was banned. She was unemployed. She was in every meaningful way erased. Her hard karma wasn't a single event, it was the rest of her life. A social and professional prison of her own, making where every Google search of her name for all time would begin and end with this day. Elijah Vance's life, meanwhile, changed just as radically, but in the opposite direction. The story was irresistible. Hero captain defends aviation prodigy from bully. Zenith Airlines, in a move that was equal parts moral imperative and PR genius, embraced the narrative. They didn't just issue a statement, they launched a campaign. They confirmed Elijah's scholarship, his perfect 4.0 GPA, his logged simulator hours, and his volunteer work teaching STEM to younger kids. They released a statement condemning Ms. Miller's behavior, and in the same breath announced a new $10 million endowment for the Future Leaders Program, naming Captain David Harrison as its full-time executive director upon his upcoming retirement. Elijah, with his parents and Captain Harrison by his side, did exactly one television interview. He sat there not in his hoodie, but in the new flight jacket Harrison had given him, and he spoke. The interviewer, expecting anger instead, found grace. "That woman, I'm not angry at her," Elijah said, his voice calm and clear. "Honestly, I just felt sorry for her. She seemed like she was having the worst day of her life. I wish she hadn't tried to make it my worst day too. All I've ever wanted to do is fly. I just want to focus on that." The quote, like the video of Emily, went viral, but for all the right reasons. Applications to the Future Leaders program surged by 500%. Mr. Abernathy, his passion project, now a global symbol of an inclusive future, personally saw to it that Elijah's path was cleared of all obstacles. The fast track was an understatement. It was a rocket launch. The flight deck of a Zenith 708-79 Dreamliner parked at the gate at LAX. The new plane smell was still present in the gleaming, silent cockpit, a technological marvel of glass screens and fly-by-wire controls. The pre-dawn light of the airport was a sea of blue and red lights. In the left seat, the captain's seat, sat David Harrison. His uniform was immaculate, but his tie was just a little loose. This was his last flight, his retirement trip, a long haul to Tokyo. In the right-hand seat, the co-pilot sat a young man. His face was calm, focused, and belonged to someone who had found their exact place in the universe. He moved with an economy of motion, his hands dancing over the control panels. "Pre-flight check complete. Flight plan loaded, FMC is green." First Officer Elijah Vance said, his voice now a deep, confident baritone. At 21, he was the youngest first officer to ever qualify for the 787er Prodigy, who had shattered every record in the program. "Good work, Elijah," Captain Harrison said, his voice thick with a genuine fatherly pride. "Weather looks clear all the way to the international dateline. Smooth ride for my last hurrah, eh?" "I wouldn't have it any other way, Captain." Elijah smiled. "Though I'm pretty sure I'm doing all the flying. You're just here for the snacks." Harrison chuckled. "Watch it, kid, or I'll make you do the 4 a.m. pre-check in the rain one last time." He leaned back, the moment of levity passing, and looked at the young man he now considered a second son. "You know, Elijah," he said quietly, "I've been thinking about that day at JFK. A lot. This whole program. It's been the best part of my career. Better than the test pilot days. Better than my first command. You changed my life that day, David," Elijah said, using his first name as he now did on the ground. "You changed mine," Harrison countered. "I was getting crusty. This job was becoming about schedules and fuel reports. That day, you and her, it reminded me what this is all about. It's not the planes, it's the people. It's about getting them where they're going safely and with dignity. You reminded me of that." He pointed to the window seat in the cockpit just behind Elijah's. "That's why I've always loved the window seat. Best view in the house." Elijah's smile widened. He turned back to the controls, his hands resting on the yoke. "I never did ask you. That day on the plane. What were you going to do if I hadn't stepped in?" Elijah paused, his gaze fixed on the long runway, lit up and waiting. "I wasn't going to move, Captain," he said, his voice perfectly steady. "I'd earned that seat. I knew where I was supposed to be. I was just waiting for the plane to." Harrison grinned. "Yeah, you did." He clapped him on the shoulder. "Well, you've earned this one too. You ready to fly us to Tokyo, First Officer? Get this old man retired?" Elijah Vance turned a bright, confident smile on his face, a future he had earned waiting for him in the sky. "Ready when you are, Captain." And that's the story of Flight 715. It just goes to show you that the status you think you have can be taken away in a second, but your character, that's what defines you. Emily Miller thought her gold card made her better than everyone else, but she forgot that respect isn't a perk. It's something you earn. Elijah Vance and Captain Harrison showed us what real-life heroes look like. They don't just fly planes. They stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. It's a real-life story that reminds us that a little bit of kindness costs nothing, but a lack of it can cost you everything. What did you think of Emily's hard karma? Was it deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want more real-life drama karma and incredible twists, make sure you hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications. We have new stories dropping every week, and you don't want to miss a single one. Thank you for listening.